So now we're going to learn about the header, the nav, and the main HTML elements. We'll look at some of the exact documentation on like what do they say you can and can't do with it. And these are semantic elements. So we're learning about semantic HTML elements. And here are all of the semantic HTML elements that we're going to learn about for structuring our content. These are the ones that you use 99% of the time, all these right here. And notice I've also just listed that the div and the span are not semantic. So those are just for generic containers for holding content when none of the semantic elements could be used or were applicable. So they do have their place, but you also want to use them sparingly. Div is a block level generic container. Span is an inline element generic container, right? So if you want to contain something inline, span, generic. And if you want to contain something in a generic container, block level, div. All right, so let's talk about header, nav, and main. So header is for a group of introductory or navigational aids, right? May contain some heading elements, but also other elements like a logo. So introductory or navigational aids. So that's not like introductory aids. That would be like introductory, like there's navigational aids. Introductory content would be better. See, the documentation doesn't always word things well. A group of introductory content or navigational aids. So I hope that's more clear. And it can contain some heading elements, but also other elements like a logo must not be a descendant of header, footer, or address. So don't confuse header, heading, and head. So we have our HTML document, and our HTML document has the DTD, like the document type declaration, doc type HTML up at the top, and then we have HTML, and then we have the head, and we have the body. So that's the head tag, right, of your HTML document. And then we have headings, and headings are like H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, and those are super important, and they tell search engines what is most important on the page. It's a way that we outline our document, and that's different than the document outlining algorithm, which nobody uses. So don't pay attention to that one. And then header, right? There's like three things going on here with head in them, right? Header is just like a block level container for content. It's semantic. This is a header. You could use a header on a web page, right? So we could be like, hey, this is the header of the web page. So within the body tag, we'd say header. And this is the header of that web page. So headers are really commonplace, obviously, like from this picture, to put in like the header content. Your navigation bar up here, your logo. Do any of them have nav in their header? I really like putting my nav in the header. That totally makes sense to me. But they do it like this. But I don't want it on another layer. Like my nav is usually in my header. All right, so what can you and can you not do with header? Just coming back down here. So it can contain introductory content or navigational aids. That's cool. And it can't be a descendant of another header. So you can't have a header nested within a header. It can't be a descendant of a footer. You can't have a footer with a header. And it can't be a descendant of address. And so you could go look at the documentation for that. Just header MDN, and it takes you there. And notice we've looked at content category and permitted content before, but here's permitted parent elements. So that's interesting, and that's where we got that information I just read to you. And unfortunately, there's no reverse lookup, right? So it could have any parent, right, as long as the parent accepts flow content. Because this is flow content, right? So the parent has to accept flow content. So you just have to go look like, hey, could I put this in an article? So I'd go and I'd find an article, and then an article says it accepts flow content. Cool. An article can have a header. What about a section? Can a section have a header? I'd go and I'd look and I'd see, okay, where's the section? Right there. And a section takes flow content. That's what it is allowed to take. And a header is flow content. So, and we could just prove that, verify that, header is right there, right? So we could put a header in a section. So a section could have a header. And if that made sense, cool. And you could think about it, right? Like if we go back to that newspaper example, here's the weekend section. And in the here's the header for the weekend section. And then we have these different articles in the weekend section. And each article could have a header, right? Like, there's the header of the beginning. But probably in an article, I'd just have an H1. Maybe I'd have a header. Depends upon how much stuff there is. You also want to like not feel like you have to use everything. Like use the most appropriate and keep it lean is also a really good rule. So that's header. Okay, it's just don't get confused by everything I shared. It's just keep it simple. And keeping it simple, header is like the top, where you put the top content. That's the block level container for top level content of a whole page, right? Like so within the body tags, you'd say header, and this is the header for the whole page. And then it could also be like the header for an article. It could be the header for a section. And then everything else we just learned was just like, hey, what can take a header? And that's a really good question. And I showed you how to answer that. All right, so then we have a nav. So a nav is a section with navigation links. And this is intended for major blocks of navigation links, right? So you could have many nav elements, like one for site navigation, one for intra-page navigation. Those all don't necessarily need to be wrapped in nav. Every time I throw down an anchor tag, I don't have to put nav around it, like, oh, here's something for people to navigate. Nav is for like, here's the main navigation on the page. Cool, let me wrap that in nav, just so I'm telling the search engines and, accessibility and myself, readability when I look at the code and others, so all that. I'm telling people, search engines, all that, this is the main navigation on the page. And you could have more than one on a page. So links may link to other pages. Not all links within a document must be in a nav element. And it's common for footers, like the footer element often has a list of links that don't need to be in a nav. All right, cool. That's just kind of the way it goes. And we could look at the, documentation on that and see if there's anything interesting. For time's sake, we won't spend much time here. But like a lot of the usage notes are the things I just pointed out in my notes. I kind of culled through here and was like, let me just pull out the most important stuff and put it into my words, as much as possible, make it more readable. So, right, any parent that accepts flow content can be its parent. And it accepts flow content. And content, it is flow content. Cool. So, I don't know. Nothing new there. All right, next one is main. And so main is for the main content on the body of a page. So like, hey, here's the main content. And you saw that when I outlined the New York Times article. I was like, this is the main thing on this page. So I put it within main. So the main content of the body of a document or application, content that is central topic of a document, should be unique to the document. So this should be like, hey, it's not like on every document. So it excludes content that's repeated across documents. And it can't be a descendant of article aside, footer, header, or nav, because this is just like, it's not the main part of an article. This is like the main part of the page. So you're telling search engines, hey, this is the main part. You're telling screen readers, this is the main part. All right, so that's main. Only one main element can be used per document. That's it. So here's a description of those three. If you want to read through them, it's pretty much, the exact same thing I just went through right there. But that's header, nav, and main. In the next video, we're going to take a look at article and section in more depth.